Hello, everybody, and welcome back to What Does Jesus Teach? Today, we're going to be returning to the series, The End Times and Revelation, and we're jumping into Revelation chapter 8. Let us begin. Now, I want to put out a couple questions to think about as we go through. First one, as it's noted here, what happens when the last seal of the scroll is removed? Remember that the seals aren't technically all removed yet. The sixth seal was removed in chapter 6. We have, obviously, after that, the people out of the Great Tribulation, the rapture happened, all that stuff. But the last seal isn't removed yet. Number two, after the seal is removed, in chapter 8, do we see anyone getting saved while the wrath of God is being poured out? In chapter 8 or beyond. If you want to read further, and I definitely encourage everybody to do so, read all the way through and see if you find anybody from the earth that's getting saved. And number three, other than the 144,000, do we see anyone excluded or protected during the wrath of God being poured down? So those are just kind of three questions to think about. And let's get into the chapter. Okay, so Revelation chapter 8, verse 1. Let's begin reading. It says, "When the Lamb broke the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. And I saw the seven angels who stand before God, and seven trumpets were given to them. Another angel came and stood at the altar, holding a golden censer, and much incense was given to him, so that he might add it to the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar, which was before the throne of God." Before the throne. "And the smoke of the incense, with the prayers of the saints, went up before God out of the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer and filled it with the fire of the altar and threw it on the earth. And there followed peals of thunder and sounds and flashes of lightning and an earthquake. And the seven angels who had the seven trumpets prepared themselves to sound them." Okay. All right. So with the church raptured at this point, we now go back to the final seal being removed or broken. It was, again, we had quite the eventful intermission after chapter 6. But note that as at the end of chapter 6, again, only the first 6 seals are removed, not the last one. So now we're seeing what's happening once the 7th seal is removed. What's interesting is that once the seal is removed, there's like silence for like 30 minutes. It doesn't say if anything's going on specifically during those 30 minutes, only if there was silence. I don't know. Again, this is just my imagination a little bit, but I can imagine with him and like, ooh, the 7th seal is gone. What's going to happen next kind of thing. And everybody's kind of just waiting for the show. So almost like a 30-minute, intermission commercial with no ads. All right, so afterwards, the seven angels who are prepared to begin sending God's wrath down to the earth are given seven trumpets, and they are prepared to enact the wrath of God. See, unlike in Revelation chapter 6, when we saw nothing coming from God, God not commanding anything, none of his angels causing anything, here it's going to be very different. The trumpets are given to these angels, and they're going to start sounding the trumpets, and as they sound them, something different takes place. Something being done in heaven is causing effects to take place on the earth. Excuse me. All right, so the first one, verse 7 says, "The first sounded, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood. And they were thrown down to the earth, and a third of the earth was burnt up, and a third of the trees were burnt up, and all the green grass was burnt up." All right, so here we see the first part of God's wrath coming down to the earth. Punishment and vengeance has indeed begun. Imagine seeing a third of the earth burned, a third of the trees burned, and all the green grass burned up. The only thing it doesn't mention here, in case you're wondering, because I wonder the same thing, is how long does this process last? Is this over a couple of days? Is this like an instantaneous thing? It could be a single hour, and it could be several weeks. It doesn't say specifically. But the other thing is also, it isn't mentioned here, but I wonder, and this is just me, right? How would it affect people's breathing? I mean, oxygen is produced from trees and plant life and so on, and we're talking about a third of them to just kind of be wiped out. So even if it takes a couple days or a couple weeks for this all to happen, what happens if in a matter of just, let's just say presumably less than a month, all this happens? How much of the oxygen starts disappearing out of the atmosphere for us to breathe? if a third of what produces it is suddenly gone? So it's something to think about. All right, so we're going to go back to a visual. And on the left, you're going to see from the midpoint of the abomination of desolation when it took place towards the right, the events so far in chapter 8. Okay, so we see there, the seal number 7 is broken, the trumpets are distributed, and the first trumpet is sounded. And what we just saw. Okay, verse 8, the second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. And a third of the sea became blood, and a third of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. So now we see the impact of the second trumpet. John described what looked like a mountain of fire hitting the ocean, causing a third of the sea creatures and ships in the ocean to be killed and destroyed. This obviously would include those in ships and surrounding areas. Now this is an interpretation or a possibility now. I know a lot of commentaries I've read and people I've spoken to and just through some studying, they suppose this to be maybe like a large meteor, being tossed into the ocean, which would cause sudden death of so much sea life. Another aspect of the crash of a meteor in the ocean, which caused a tsunami that would sink many ships. As for the blood, I can't really give a scientific view, but maybe some of the sea creatures, like big whales, they do bleed. So. But a third of it being blood, I don't know. The ocean's pretty vast. So not one I can scientifically really say 100% for sure. I'll just say at the end of the day, this is pretty bad. With a third of the water turning to blood, it makes it very difficult to take any kind of ocean water and convert it into drinking water, if that's even a thing. And again, we don't see a length of time here, like the first trumpet, but this is pretty bad. At the very least, you just cut off a third of the food source in terms of fish. All right, so with the visual again on this update, we got trumpet number 2 sounding. All right, the third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of waters. The name of the star is called wormwood, and a third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the waters because they were made bitter. All right, so now we're seeing the impact of the blowing of the third trumpet. Similar to the second trumpet, a mass of something burning fell on rivers and springs of water, which is our source of drinking water. It seems to turn our drinking water into being like wormwood. Wormwood is a plant that is extremely bitter, and it causes nausea. So imagine drinking water because you're thirsty, but every time you drink it, it makes you throw up. You wouldn't be able to drink it. Eventually you die because imagine, you're really, really thirsty. You're looking for water, you drink that water, it makes you throw up, which makes you even more dehydrated. So yeah, people will die from drinking those waters. You wouldn't be able to drink it. So many will die as a result of this because they won't be able to find water. And the water they drink will make you even more dehydrated. So it actually speeds up the process. All right, quick visual update. Now we have, trumpet number 3 sounding. Let's continue. All right, verse 12, the fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars were struck, so that a third of them would be darkened, and the day would not shine for a third of it, and the night in the same way. Then I looked and heard an eagle flying in mid-heaven, saying with a loud voice, woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth, because the remaining blast of the trumpet of the 3 angels are about to sound. All right. So now we see the impact of the trumpet number 4. This particular trumpet is not causing direct damage to the earth but it is giving an additional layer of darkness because it's going to have a very dark effect. Now, if you think about it like a typical summer day, which has the longest days, the sun is shining from about 6 a.m., 6:30 to about 8 p.m., 8:30, depending on where you live. That's about 14 hours of some degree of sunshine. Now, you take a third out of the sun, and you're taking, now you're down to about, 10, 9 or 10 hours, depending on where you live, which doesn't sound too horrible if you live close to the equator. But if it already gets dark early in parts of the, the globe where you're at, it could be, instead of being dark at 6:30 or 7, it can be dark at 4 o'clock. And instead of the sun coming out at 6:30, 7, it might not come out till 9, 10, or 10:30. So all of a sudden, darkness is going to last a lot longer. And on top of that, with the part of the moon being taken off, that means it's, there's less moon so not only is there less sunshine, there's less moon to reflect the the night sky. And then a third of the stars are gone, which help illuminate as well. So nights are going to they're going to feel a lot darker. And it's going to be darker because there's less light to reflect. So it's a pretty scary time. And on top of that, after now this fear going on, we have verse 13, right? You have this eagle kind of saying, whoa, 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 because the next three that are about to sound, this wasn't bad enough apparently. So whatever's coming next is going to be really, really bad. And it is. All right. So we have trumpet number 4 and the list of events. And that is the close of chapter 8. So on the next one, we'll begin with chapter 9, and we're going to continue with what happens with the next set of trumpets and what goes on with that. And believe me, it will get much worse. And that being said, I'll close it here. God bless you. Any comments you have, please let me know. Happy to read them, comment on them, answer to them. And, if you're liking the series so far, and you have, I forget to mention this sometimes, but if you have friends that are very heavy in pre-tribulation rapture doctrine, send them this video series. Tell them to watch it and take some notes, and see if they can find something wrong with it. It might start a good dialogue. Ultimately, that's one of the purposes of making this, so you can share it and have other people at least take a good look at what the scriptures are showing, and let them challenge the doctrine that they have, and see what goes on from there, and be there for them, pray for them. All right, that's it. God bless you. Have a good one. Bye.